Many higher-end plates will have pivot arms that are adjustable in length to achieve a perfectly flush fit in the pivot cup. Having appropriately adjusted pivot arms will create a more efficient action and reduce wear on your plate's components. In this learning center, we're going to take a look at how to adjust your pivot arms for that perfect fit. The pivot arm, or more simply the pivot, is this extension from the truck that sits in the pivot cup and creates a fixed point on which the truck can move left and right. Many trucks have fixed position pivots that cannot be adjusted in length, while many high-end plates will feature trucks that have adjustable pivots that can be lengthened or shortened to better fit in the pivot cup. So how do we adjust an adjustable pivot arm? First, we want to make sure we undo the locking nut. Once this lock nut spins freely, you can then take a smaller wrench, or on some pivot arms, you can simply hand loosen or tighten. Once you get the desired length of your pivot arm, make sure that you put that lock nut back down and make sure it's locked in nice and secure. Now that we know how to adjust the length of our pivot arms, we'll show you how to install them on your plates in the correct length. We want to do this with the assembly undone. Go ahead and put your first retainer and cushion on the kingpin. Make sure they are seated all the way down. We'll prepare the pivot arm by putting it all the way at its shortest length. So go ahead and undo the lock nut, screw in the pivot arm. We don't need to relock that nut as we will be adjusting it in just a second. Go ahead and place this truck flush on the cushion and rest that ball in the pivot cup. At this point, it's definitely too short, and we can test this by holding the truck in place on the cushion and pushing down towards the pivot cup. We get quite a bit of wiggle and quite a bit of play in there, so it's not long enough to be flush against the cup, so we'll need to lengthen that. We'll grab our tool, and we'll want to do small intervals, about one turn at a time, so that when we do eventually hit the back of the pivot cup, it's at just the right length. I still get a bit of play there, so I'll want to do it again. Give it a good one full turn, test it. At this point, I don't have any wiggle, I don't have any play in that pivot cup. It is kind of hard to visually identify, so you do have to rely on how it feels when you push on it. I do believe I have a good length now though, so I will turn this lock nut down, and we can test it by reversing the process and putting the pivot ball in first, all the way against the back of the pivot cup, and then this truck should fall perfectly flush on top of the bottom cushion. If the pivot arm is too long or too short, it will not fall perfectly on that cushion, and that's a really good sign that you need to adjust its length. If they are too long or too short, you can cause undue pressure on the cushions, pivot cups, and kingpins that can wear those out much faster than usual. Now that we've got a good length on our pivot arm, we can assemble the rest of our kingpin assembly: top cushion, top retainer, and kingpin nut. At this point, we have an assembled skate with a good length of the pivot arm. You can still make adjustments while this is all assembled, but do beware that firm cushions or a too tight kingpin nut can sometimes mislead you on how much pressure is in that pivot cup. This has been a look at adjustable pivots. Be sure to check out the rest of our learning center at derbywarehouse.com.